In a world where talent is evenly distributed, but venture capital is concentrated in coastal silos, smart startup money is heading for the Midcontinent. Welcome to the Midcon Markup, a podcast that uncovers the inspiring stories of our visionary tech entrepreneurs and the investors who believe in them. I'm your host, Cody Merrill with Cortado Ventures. Listen, learn, and make your Midcon Markup. Welcome to another episode of the Midcon Markup. Today, super fortunate to be joined by Cortado General Partner, David Woods.
Good to be here. Thanks, Cody.
David, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you and all of your talents and accomplishments. You CEO of Ditch Witch. You have also been CEO of Magellan Executive Partners and also a general partner with Cortado. Before we delve into recent career success, I'd love to know, what were your formative life experiences like that led you on this career journey?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Cody. First, let me just say I've watched enough of these that you do a fantastic job at these. So thank you for asking me to be here. I hope I can hold a candle to some of the ones you've done in the past. The other thing I'll tell you is this kind of a setting is not my favorite thing, where it's a little bit too much about me. And so one of my prayers this morning was, I hope in some way I can, in my answer, share some lessons that might serve others in some form or fashion. So a little less about me, more about maybe some lessons that might serve other people is probably my goal today. So thanks for being here. My formative years, so my father was in the military. He retired as a two-star general. However, I didn't know him as a two-star general. I knew him when he was a lieutenant, a captain, a major, et cetera, as I was growing up. I was born in Germany, Landstuhl, Germany. In fact, my wife and I just a year ago, that was on my bucket list to go back there because I'd never actually been back to where I was born. So we went there last year and it was just fantastic. We moved a lot growing up. So we moved, I figured it up not too long ago, we moved on average every 18 months. So that's a lot of packing and moving and trying to get to know new people in a new place. So I think we moved a total of about 18 times. No, every 18 months. That's what it was, between the ages of 1 and basically 18. So one of the things that happened in that, probably a lesson that I learned about that, was I could not be transactional in my friendships. So you move somewhere, you have a limited amount of time to make friends. And so there were times where I made friends with thugs. There were times where I made friends with nerds. There were times where I made friends with the athletes. It didn't really matter. I knew that I had to learn to get to know people that were around me in my neighborhood, whatever that was, as quickly as possible. And those friendships needed to be as authentic as possible for me to even enjoy the ride. So from that standpoint, that helped me, I think, as I reflect later in life, that I meet a wide variety of people, and I find something great about each and every one of them. So anyway, we ended up, when I was 9th and 10th grade, in Oklahoma. So my only exposure to Oklahoma prior to that was we had some cousins that lived in Tonkawa, and growing up, every once in a while going across country, we'd swing by Oklahoma and see them. But I didn't really know Oklahoma. But anyway, Dad got stationed here in Oklahoma, in Enid, Oklahoma. And we were there for about 18 months or so. And so I was getting ready to enter my junior year, and he got stationed again in Del Rio, Texas, which is not a city I'd recommend if you're just during your teenage years, because it was just not that much fun. So anyway, when I was at the end of that, and he was only there for less than a year, and then he got stationed to go for his second tour in Vietnam. And that second tour was hard on the family. I know it was hard on him. But my mom came in, we're in Del Rio, and she goes, we've lived everywhere. And then, by the way, my brother had already moved to, he was off in college. And so we had a lot of freedom. And my mom came in one day and said, and the lesson here is, it's really not a lesson. Everybody experiences those moments in life where you make a decision, you don't overthink it, and it changes the trajectory of your life. And this was one of those moments. And the moment was, Mom goes, we've lived a lot of places. We can live anywhere we want. It's just you and me now. where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go back to Oklahoma. And I'd gotten really involved in swimming and band and things like that. And I just liked the atmosphere in Oklahoma. So we moved back. Now I'm beginning of my senior year, and third day in, they have these girls who didn't play an instrument, but their job was to they were like the admin folks of the band, right? It's a pretty big band. And this one girl walked by, and her job was to hand out music whenever we were going to try a brand new piece of music. And this one girl, she handed me my music, and she was really cute. And she looked at me, and it was as flirty a look as you could get. And I'm like, wow, nobody's ever looked at me like that before. And so I sort of instantly fell in love with this girl. And we've now been married for 47 years. And so, again, that all goes back to a 30-second conversation with my mom going, let's go to Oklahoma, right? And so anyway, during high school, I enjoyed that a lot. I also decided I want to go to the Air Force Academy. And so I worked my little hiney off trying to get into the Air Force Academy. And if you've ever known anybody or tried to do that on your own, it is an ordeal to get accepted into the Air Force Academy, even with good connections. And because my dad by then was a full bird colonel at that time, even with those connections, it was still hard. Finally got accepted. By then, I'm now deeply in love with my now wife. And I'm like, wow, Colorado is a long way from Oklahoma, because she was a year younger. And making that commute on a regular basis was going to seem daunting to me. So then I switched. I go, I'm going to go to Westminster in Missouri. That was closer. And I had some friends that were going there, and I thought that'd be cool. I looked at that for a little bit, and then I thought, that's still too far. So then I was like doing this geographic circle around Enid, Oklahoma, and the college that bubbled up was Oklahoma State. And so I decided I'm going to go to Oklahoma State. And it just pissed my dad off. And the reason it pissed him off, it wasn't that he wanted me to go to the Air Force Academy. His point was geographic location is a piss poor reason to pick a college. And so I didn't disagree, but I said, it is what it is, and this is what I want to do. So ended up going to Oklahoma State. Again, another, probably a well thought through decision in my life. And as most of us, if you think about where you are, you've had a lot of not well thought through decisions that hopefully have turned out well for you. And that was one of them. And so anyway, I go to OSU. It was a great career. My wife and I think we had probably 7 or 8 jobs together. We learned that we liked being around each other enough. So we'd go look for a job somewhere. And if they had 2 openings, we'd both apply. We wouldn't tell them we were dating at that time because we were afraid that would be something against us. And so we had paper routes together. We worked in a clothing store together. We worked in the cafeteria together. I cleaned dishes and she did something that normal people do. And anyway, it was great. And so, but at one point we had a job where we were managing about 300 apartments together. And it was really pretty cool. And they paid me $15,000 a year to manage these apartments. They gave me a pickup, and they gave, by then my wife and I had gotten married, and they gave us a 3-bedroom apartment. I'm like, this is cool. And so I'm like, I'm rocking along and I'm going to college. However, if you've ever, well, most of you probably haven't been in this, but I was in that situation where I would not take as many classes as I should. So I'd start with 18, and within a month or two, I'm down to about 3 hours. And so I did this thing where I'm doing this trajectory. Like if I stay on this path, I probably won't graduate till about I'm 35 years old. So, and I guess for me, the lesson in that, and as I look back, my whole life has been figuring out where I am, trying to figure out where I want to be down the road, and deciding, am I on the right trajectory? And for me in that moment, I was like, this is not the right trajectory. So I went to my wife at the time and I said, if you don't mind, And if you don't mind continuing to work, I'm going to buckle down and I'm going to get this degree done. And I'd done the math. I could get it done in about 12 months. And so it took 9 hours that summer, then 8, 21, and 21 hours, which is a pretty heavy load for college. And so anyway, good news is I did graduate. Surprisingly, those were the best grades I ever made my whole college life. And I think it was because I was so mission focused at that point. And my wife and I's plan was on the backside of that, we were going to go East Coast or West Coast. That seemed to be the cool thing to do. And a buddy of mine who actually worked at the apartments he lived at the apartments that we had been managing, he said, hey, they're interviewing over at Ditch Witch over in Perry, Oklahoma. I can probably get you an interview if you want one. And it was mildly interesting to me. So I said, sure. So his dad ran the computer department, IT at that time. And so I went over there and started interviewing. And it was the strangest thing, Cody. When I pulled up in that driveway in Perry, Oklahoma, it just weirdly spoke to me. I said, this is exactly, not necessarily Ditch Witch, this is exactly the type of company I want to work for. It wasn't too small, but it wasn't so big where I'm one of 30,000, right? I thought, I knew in my heart I wouldn't get lost in there. I could have a great career there. So I actually dropped another one of those not well thought through decisions. I dropped every other interview I had at that point. I said, by golly, I'm going to figure out how to get on here. And it took a few months, but they finally got me on. And that was in the fall of 1979. And so I didn't graduate until spring of 1980, but they let me come and work in the shop for the first 6 months or my last semester at college. It was fantastic. And so I ended up spending 22 years at Ditch Witch. And it was a wonderful, wonderful career. Anyway, during that time, I got ended up being CEO when I was pretty young. I was about 38 when I got to be CEO, and I kind of happy to chat a little bit about how that happened. Took me a lot of hindsight reflection to figure out why was I that lucky, and I think I understand a few of the components.
Well, what departments were you in? What were you doing there?
Well, that was part of the not well thought through, but it served me well. So I started out as a factory rep. So a factory rep means you live in Perry, Oklahoma, but they give you a territory where there are Ditch Witch dealers. So my first territory was New England. I lived in Perry, but you'd travel out for 2 weeks and you'd come home for 2 weeks, and you'd travel out for 2 weeks. And did that for a few years. Very difficult on the family because my wife, literally, you couldn't leave. You had to leave on a Sunday. You didn't leave on a Monday. You had to leave on a Sunday. 2 weeks later, you couldn't come home on the Friday. You had to wait until Saturday. So it was 2 full weeks that you were on the road. Very difficult on my wife. She's an amazing trooper. She not only handled that, she began raising our in particular, our oldest son, who was at that time. So anyway, I did that for a while. And then one day, and all my buddies were kind of like, okay, we're going to go here. And then the next job is right above that. And the next job is right above that. And somebody came out one day and said, hey, we got this job over in the parts department. Does anybody want to do that? And I'd seen the guy that was running it at the time. And it was sort of I hate to call it a dead end job, is what it appeared to be. But that's because probably the guy that was running it made it into a dead end job. So I said, I'll do it. And all my buddies were like, Woods, why are you doing that? I go, you can't go anywhere from there. You need to go up, not sideways or do this or that. I thought, yeah, but they needed somebody, and I had some thoughts or creative ideas around it. So I moved into there, and a year and a half later, they had another opportunity, and it was somewhere in another different department out in shipping and stuff like. So I bounced back and forth a lot, and again, all my buddies were like, you're just bouncing around. That's not going to serve you well, right? But one thing I learned, and I guess the lesson I learned that I would say to anybody is look around for ways you can help. And that's what I was doing. They needed help. Not that I was the savior, but they needed help. And I thought, I can go do that. But the most important lesson was wherever I went, I had two things always in my mind, no matter what it was. I'm going to make this look like the coolest job in the company. I mean, when I'm out in parts, it was sort of like viewed as that's where nerds go to work or something. I don't know what it was, but it was not a healthy environment. And I said, I'm going to make this the coolest job in the company, right? And I did that every job I had. And secondly, I think the thing I learned was I have to get results. So I always had this in my head. In 6 months of taking this job, I'm going to demonstrate some good results for the organization. So that helped me a lot. And so even today, I look at myself like whatever I'm working on, I try to make it look like the most fun thing anybody could ever have. And whatever I'm doing, I figure out how do we get some results. And those two things have served me well in every career that I've had. So I bounced around a lot. Next thing I know, I'm on when I was younger, my goal was to be on the senior management team by the time I was 55 years old. Because my dad's military career is sort of slow and steady. I thought that's the way all careers are. You don't get to the top till you're at the end. But I bounced around and I was on senior management by the time I was probably 35. And then at 38, I became CEO of which it was too early. I didn't know enough, but in hindsight, I probably understand why I was chosen for that. But it was humbling as well as scary. But we did well. We'd been about 120 million most of my career up to that point, but I didn't have the same last name as the owners of the company. I thought me and the management team, I'm like, we're expendable. We're either got to get this thing rolling or somebody's going to walk in and say, we need some more different people in here. So same thing. I'm like, I'm going to make this really fun and we're going to go get some results.
Okay. I've got to ask you, making things fun or giving the appearance of fun. It's hard to fake fun. And so is it,
no, I wouldn't say it was fake.
Is it one of those things where you just said, you know what, I'm going to have such a good attitude, I'm going to make it fun? No matter what the task?
I think,
or did you actually find tasks that were more interesting or some combination of the two?
Yeah, probably all of the above. In any role, for heaven's sakes, we're ditch diggers, right? So, that doesn't sound fun to the average person, right? But I sort of fell in love with business. I fell in love with, how do you push here and make this bubble up over there, things like that. So just the fun of thinking things through, getting everybody on the same page, trying some things, seeing some result. That's the fun. It isn't like a ha-ha fun, right? It's not that kind of fun. It's fun like, we can make a difference here, and isn't this cool? Isn't this great?
You found fun in the pursuit of excellence.
I guess that's well said. Yeah.
Okay. Back to your career path. You were CEO and you were looking to make it fun and results.
Yeah. And so we did. We were at 120 million, which we'd been for a long time. And that's when I became...
and revenue yearly?
Yeah,
yearly
120 million per year.
Okay.
Is where we were at that time. And that's where and by the way, we actually, with my other, not Cortado, but my other company, Magellan, we work with a lot of CEOs. And it's sort of amazing when you meet a CEO, confidentially, some will go, I don't really know what my job is, right? Because it's really not a very well-defined job because it's different in every company. And so I was in that boat. I'm like, I'm not sure I know what my job is, right? But I know one of them is I got to go increase revenues and we got to make working here fun. And for me, fun was the owner at that time, my opinion, I'm like, wow, there's just way too much crap landing on his shoulders. And he was in his 70s by then. And I said, I'm going to make sure, and he was a remarkable guy. So my goal was not to replace him. My goal was like, keep him on this pedestal, make him known industry-wide as a great leader, which he was, and take stuff off of his shoulders that I know he doesn't like doing. And I got really good at that. So I let him play with the parts that he loved, and everything else I really focused on doing that and doing that really well. And we took the company from 120 million to about 350 million per year in about the first 5 years.
So I've got to say, doing the grunt stuff that somebody else doesn't want to do seems incompatible with fun.
Well, again, to me, the fun.
Where do you find this
the fun
joy?
The fun is the getting 1,600 people all on the same page. The fun is, I've always learned there's great reward in things that are hard. And so we were doing some hard things at that time, we were building a brand new industry. Everybody knew us as ditch diggers. And we were trying to get this thing called directional drilling going, which in the late 80s, early 90s, nobody really heard of that in the utility business. So, I mean, it was that kind of stuff. It wasn't, again, it's not ha-ha fun. It's like, wouldn't this be cool if we can pivot here and make a real difference? And some of those pivots landed well, all right?
So you seem to be very achievement motivated.
For an entity. Yeah. For an entity, more than I like to be successful, right? I've worked hard to be successful, but I don't get wowed by my own personal success that much. It's sort of this weird thing. I like being successful, but that's really not what drives me. I like being around people and being part of something that creates something bigger than we are individually. That's my motivation.
Yeah, that's something that I've always noticed about you, is that you're just an exceptional teammate. And that means a lot of different things in different ways. But I think everybody who's ever worked with you would probably gravitate to that word, if there was some sort of word association graph for you.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think that, and that's not bragging. I mean, that is my style. I don't like to be over somebody. Now, there's times where I have to make a decision, and I'm not afraid to make a decision. So I don't lead by committee. I just try to lead well, right? And what I learned is leading well comes from creating a great team that can make decisions on their own without having to come and ask the boss, is this the right thing to do? And that was a lesson I learned early on. I had an example once that I kind of mentioned that travel schedule. Now, I had kind of grown away from that and was in other parts. But I remember during that time, one of the guys that was traveling missed the birth of his child, right? Because of that very rigid schedule. And his wife had the child a little early, so granted. But shortly after that, I was moved back over, and now I'm head of marketing for Ditch Witch. And I remember thinking, that's never going to happen under my watch, ever again. I didn't like it when I was doing it. I thought it was too rigid for what we were really trying to do. So the lesson I learned was like, how do I make people own their own career? I didn't want to own their career. I didn't want to own their life. And so I went back to accounting and I said, can you make separate budgets for each individual factory rep? Yeah, we can do that. I said, okay. Because I already knew we had individual goals for each factory rep. So you take goals and a budget. That's what we did. And I went to the factory rep and I go, I don't care if you ever travel again. You need to hit your goals and you have to stay within this budget. And to me, that's the essence of empowering somebody. You got to tell them what they need to achieve, give them the right resources to go do that, and then you got to back out of the way. And I'd say I've done that pretty well. It was a lesson I sort of learned intuitively growing up, but now I'm very intentional about that. Our team here, I don't micromanage anything. Certainly I don't micromanage anything at Magellan. Now, I'm very detail oriented on certain things, but I don't micromanage, if that makes sense.
That's an incredible story of how you properly align incentives. So that's what you did whenever you were running marketing. And then at some point soon thereafter, you matriculated to CEO. You were doing the things that the owner didn't want to do. You were at 125 million revenue when you started. And then walk me through that process of taking Ditch Witch to the next level.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think a lesson in that was that everything I've ever achieved and everything, actually, when I consult or our firm consults, we're trying to simplify something down where you don't need to go do 100 things to create success. If you really boil it down, most success comes from, well, let me put it this way. You go ask any business owner if they've got a history where they were kind of going like this and all of a sudden it took off. And you ask them on the backside of that success, like, wow, that's amazing. What did you do? They will only name 3, 4, or 5 things. They won't name the thousands of things they did. They'll name 3, 4, or 5 things. So somewhere in my life, I learned this isn't about doing 1,000 things or 100 things, right? It's like, what are the things we need to do to pivot and make something happen here? And for us, it was directional drilling was one. I think the other one was our distribution network was becoming very outdated, and I knew we had to completely sort of change the basically all the dealers, not all of them, but there were some that were great and some that were pretty marginal at that point. I'm like, we've got to make a change there because our ability to go to market was really critical, and we'd gotten a little weaker at that. And so that was the other one. And I think the other one was just getting 1,600 people all on the same page trying to move a mountain, and that's fun. You know, when you feel like everybody is empowered to do their own thing. So anyway, that's sort of the lesson I learned of how to do that. When I started at Magellan, we do that. I feel like we do that at Cortado. The team here has been very gracious to let me kind of lead some of the strategy sessions in terms of our internal, what are we trying to do?
Oh, I always look forward to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I think people look forward to them because they know it's not
it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun.
The partners are going to figure out that we don't have to run every detail. Just get a team on the same page and everybody gets to do their own thing.
Awesome. So back to the numbers of Ditch Witch. So you wanted results. What were the results that you were able to achieve as CEO?
The two most prominent ones, one was taking it from 120 million to 350 million. And at the same time, when I got there, our net profit was around 2 or 3% net profit at the end of the year. And I remember going to the owner one time, like, you know, you could sell this and put it in a CD and you're going to make more money than we're making busting our rears trying to make something happen. I go, we've got to get off this 2, 3, 4% of the bottom line. And so during that same period, it wasn't just about revenues. It became about how do we make a profit. And in that situation, I still don't believe profit for the way that people view profit now. Profit is, to me, is nothing more than retained earnings that we can figure out how to reinvest that and create something different that's unique and better and great and stuff. So yeah, you need some profit so you can pay employees bonuses and stuff like that. I mean, I like it from that standpoint. But equally important, I like the idea of it's retained earnings that we can now reinvest and do something else cool and fun. So
you're wired to be growth oriented, keep as much of the capital in the business, transform the business, outcompete your competitors than you are. How can we pay the owners as much as possible, as quickly as possible?
Quite honestly, it's never been. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know how to, by any measurement, people would go, David's been successful financially, right? But again, that's really not my driver. It's sort of an outcome of just doing good work, right? And and I don't feel I'm greedy at all. I love paying bonuses. To me, everything that I've done has really been if I look in the mirror, I can honestly say, I try to do things to help other people, and that will always trump what is beneficial to me. Have I been fortunate and successful? Absolutely. I couldn't ignore that, or I couldn't decline that at all. It's just, but that's not my driver. It's not my driver. However, I will say, when I started, the thought of Cortado came out. That came out of something I read about your personal finances. And I don't know, am I switching subjects on you too much, Cody?
That was Ditch Witch. Let's tell the Magellan story, and then we'll tell the Cortado story.
Well, I always wanted to own my own business. I knew that at some point. The Ditch Witch was a fantastic company, still is a fantastic company, but it was never going to be my company, right? And I was enough of I'd call an entrepreneur, internal entrepreneur. I'd go try things and figure out if I could make them work. And so I enjoyed that. And I had a buddy of mine when I became CEO. He looked at me and goes, "You won't last." I go, "What do you mean I won't last?" He goes, "In about 2 years, you're going to get bored and you're going to want to go do something else." I'm like, "No, that's not true." I mean, it was a pinnacle job, right? You wouldn't think you would want to not do that. But there was some truth to that. In about 2 years, we kind of had it. We were on the right trajectory. Anyway, I always wanted to own my own company. By then, I had learned, I didn't know this before, I'd become a really good student of strategy and the idea of how do you get a bunch of people all on the same page. And I learned I love strategy. And to me, strategy is how do you get a bunch of people on the same page and have them move in a single direction, right? And I just became passionate about it. Well, in a company like Ditch Witch, you only do strategy really about once a year, and the rest of the year you're spending implementing that strategy. I'm like, my gosh, I'd love to do this every day. And that's where the idea of being a consultant, if you will, doing strategy and leadership development sort of bubbled up. And it was a huge risk. I mean, it is the single biggest risk I ever took. And it didn't start out well. Because originally, kind of a weird side thing, I decided a lot of my buddies in the industry were American manufacturers that didn't really have an international footprint. And I kind of liked international. I'm not saying I was great at it. I was more enamored with it than anything. I said, I want to go help manufacturers do international strategy. That's where I was originally going to do. And so I decided to leave Ditch Witch and started that. And I did it for about 3 years, being another guy. And it very quickly moved into really an import-export company, not a strategy company, because that's where the money was more. Basically, his buddies going, "Can you help me get stuff out of China?" I'm like, yeah, I can do that, right? And so very quickly, that's where the money was. Woke up 3 years later, and we're an import-export company, and I hate import-export anything. Bill of ladings, if I ever see a bill of lading again, I'll have to kill somebody. It was awful.
A what?
Bill of lading. It's a shipping term. Okay. It's for the purpose of shipping something. Anyway.
Educate a SAS guy.
That's okay. It's the paperwork that goes when you ship something.
Got it.
Anyway, I hated it. And again, I think the lesson there was, I thought I could probably keep doing this and this will probably turn into something good, but I wasn't enjoying it. So again, I'm looking at where do I really want to be? This path is not going to get me there. And so I left $500,000 on the table and kind of walked. And fortunately, the company's still going. It's still an import-export company, but I'm no longer a part of it and sort of cut the ties quickly. But I think the lesson for me was if you go through something like that, you have to be really hard on yourselves. What I mean is, when I decided to go do it the next time, I'm like, and nothing's going to keep me from going and doing what I really want, which was strategy work with companies and leadership development. And that's what caused me to get into that. I came along and found, go ahead.
Okay. I've got to stop you here because I find myself in this situation, and I know lots of people find themselves in this situation. There's this very clear idea of what they want to be doing, the change that they want to be making in the world, but they feel that it's not accessible to them right now. And so they say, oh, well, I'm going to go do this one thing, and then that's going to lead to this thing. And so what do you say to that person? How do you balance your like passion and pursuing that immediately versus taking more feasible intermediary steps that you think will build there?
Well, you said a very important word there, immediate. I've never done anything immediately, right? I may figure out where I want to be down the road, and I typically don't immediately pivot. I slow down. I figure out, is this the right way to go? I mean, 22 years at Ditch Witch, I wouldn't say that was an immediate change to go do consulting. I did Exim Group, which was the name of the little import-export company. And I did that for 3 years. So it wasn't like, I knew I wasn't going to enjoy it after the first year, but I took 2 more years to figure out, okay, what's my next move?
So, okay, but your thought process as you were walking out the door at Ditch Witch was, I really love doing strategic planning.
Correct.
And so you thought, okay, well, I love doing any sort of strategic planning, but I have experience with strategic planning for equipment manufacturers.
Right.
So then you started what was initially a consultancy for strategic planning for equipment manufacturers. And then you migrated and you said, you know what? The business has evolved a little bit, but what I really love is strategic planning of any kind and
Correct.
Leadership development of any kind.
Correct.
But you walked adjacencies that sort of led you to where in your heart you wanted to be.
Yep. One of the things my dad told me later in my dad's career, after he'd become a 2-star general, his last assignment. So he grew up as a fighter pilot, air training command, right? And his last assignment was he was in charge of all of the commissaries for the military worldwide, which basically a commissary is a grocery store, right? And I remember going to him like, Dad, what? You have no experience in grocery stores. Well, hey, why did they put you in that? And how are you going to do this? And that's what he looked at me and said, and again, at a certain level, and this makes sense to me now, he said, strategy is strategy, leadership is leadership. And so once you gain those skills at that level, you can be plucked around and put into different settings and still be successful. And that always stuck with me. And I sort of knew that intuitively. And sure enough, when we started doing consultant type work, I used to say, we can do that from beer to Bibles. And the reason I said that was because early in my career there, we worked for a company that made beer. And then within the same year, we worked for a company that manufactured Bibles. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty diverse, beer to Bibles. And it doesn't matter, small, medium, large, what industry it's in, if it's nonprofit, if it's a church, it doesn't really matter. Leadership is leadership. So
we're talking about, since you started Magellan, you worked with a company that manufactured beer and a company that manufactured Bibles?
Yeah, they didn't do wasn't one company, it's 2 different companies.
Boy, that would be, I would love to go to that Christmas party.
Some Christians drink a little, so but it wasn't. They weren't entwined at all, so not at all. So anyway,
okay, but talk me through the origin of Magellan. Did you start out on your own? Did you start out with partners?
Yep.
Okay.
So when I decided to get out of Exim Group, the import-export thing, I had gotten introduced to 2 guys, Matthew Myers, Jeremy Kupacek. And so they asked me to come on, can you be CEO of a thing called Giant Partners? So I thought about it for a while. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I was going to go do strategy and leadership development stuff. And pretty quickly, Matthew had a real natural insights around anything sort of financial focused. Jeremy was a little more, he loved doing, just sort of pure leadership kinds of things. We had, right at that same time, we'd bought John Maxwell's company in Atlanta. It used to be called Maximum Impact, and we changed it to...
this is the famous leadership author.
Giant Impact. Yes, the famous leadership author. Thank you. So anyway, he went and did that for a while. Then he loved international, so he moved to London and started a thing called Giant Worldwide. Again, very, very leadership training sort of focused. So now we have 3 divisions under this giant umbrella. Pardon the expression, the giant umbrella, right? One was now Giant Capital. One was Giant Worldwide, which was the leadership stuff. And I was still running Giant Partners, which was strategy and executive development. And we thought that would be so cool because we would just leverage each other and stuff like that. And I woke up a few years later and I'm like, okay, this model is not working. It was like having 3 completely separate companies with one brand. It was confusing to internal folks. It was confusing to people outside. You try to explain it and their eyes would glaze over about halfway through that explanation. And so finally we all just kind of woke up and said, let's just all go do our own thing. So Matthew took Giant Capital, went and ran with that. Jeremy did Giant Worldwide, which is now just pure Giant all these years later. And I took everything we were doing at Giant Partners and rebranded it to be Magellan Executive Partners. So I've been doing the same thing forever, just rebranded somewhere down the path. And it was, I think it was great for all 3 of us in that way. So we rebranded into Magellan.
What do you mean we?
Well, it was basically me and, we had some admin folks. It was basically me and a guy named Brent Douglas. So Brent ran a company called Mecklenburg Duncan, probably more notably known as MD Building Products. And he had run that. I had run Ditch Witch. And we both were kind of had the same passion for what were strategy and stuff like that. And so we had a common board member when I was at Ditch Witch and he was at MD and had introduced us. And so early on, after about a year after I'd gotten going, doing what I was doing, Brent and I sort of crossed paths. And for the first 15 years of Magellan, it was basically the Brent and David show. And it was really great. Good lifestyle business, some things like that. But it was probably about 5 years ago that really the concept of changing the Magellan's model and the birth of Cortado kind of took place. And both of those were both of those were pivot moments in my life.
So, and you were saying that Magellan pivoted. So 15 years, and the first 15 years of Magellan was the David and Brent show.
Right.
And then...
Well, what had happened was I'm now...
What was the hockey stick there? Yeah.
The point was I was aging, right?
Okay.
So now I'm in my, by then, what would that be? Around 60-ish, right? And I thought, okay, this thing's either going to keep going until I retire. And then I think Brent and I both knew that if either one of us retired, the organization would probably just go away, right? And so for me, I was like, oh, crap, I don't want this thing to just go away. I mean, I'd become to believe that if you start an organization and it's doing good work, you should be working on how does this thing continue beyond you, right? That's where the name Magellan came from. Magellan actually was killed halfway through his adventure around the world, but the mission was still a success, right? And so that sort of inspired me to name it Magellan. I call it the CEO test. What are you doing that when you leave, instead of the business going down, it does this? And if you can't pass that test, you don't pass the CEO test, right? And so too many people, it's all wrapped around the person at the top. And it's nice for a while, but that's not sustainable. So the pivot point was Brent and I chatting, and I go, what's helped us a lot is the fact that you ran MD, I ran Ditch Witch. So when we walk into a company and we're talking to an owner or a CEO or whatever, we feel very comfortable talking eye to eye with that person. And we have just enough experience and probably competence that we can tell them, like, that's not going to work for you, right? I mean, it's a little bit of we call it the velvet 2x4. We're pretty comfortable doing that if it's needed. And we knew that was pretty magical, the fact that we had that as part of who we were. And so we said, well, let's start adding more people that have that same background. And so we started hiring. I say hire, we don't really hire. I started keeping my eyes open for people that were at a point in their career where maybe they want to retire, but their brains don't want to retire. Like, okay, I ran this big organization, I'm retiring, but I still have something to give the world. And that became the basis for Magellan's next step. So now we're up to 30 former CEOs, business owners, people that run something fairly significant, and many of which ran something much larger than Ditch Witch and MD Building Products. And that has served us well. It's a very, very unique business model, all with people that have caring hearts. They want to give back. We pay them when we utilize them for stuff, but the money's not their motivator either. They're more motivated by grandkids, lake house, and giving back to others. And so we have a simple little model, and people love it. And we now we're up to 30, and we probably got 4 in line that are saying, I'm getting close. When I'm done, can I come play with you guys?
That's a really cool way of capturing value, identifying this market of people who have been senior leaders, very large companies. They're at a transition point in their career where they've been telling their families for so long, I'm going to step back from work, but they still have this desire to help people. A little bit of extra money is nice, but it's more of you're giving them a way to extend their passion and to pay it forward to a new generation, and you're paying them a little bit of something. Yeah. And then on the other side, your clients are benefiting from all of the lessons that they had to learn the hard way. Yes. And delivered to them on a silver platter.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things we had to do at Magellan, and I think we're pretty good at it, is we had to create business in a box, not for our clients, for former CEOs. Because a lot of them have this desire, like, I'd love to keep helping people, but I don't have an administrative staff. I don't want to have to go create an LLC. I don't want to have, there's a lot of back end stuff that has to occur if you're going to get into a consulting business.
Just like when you switched to Magellan, you wanted to do strategic planning. They want to come in and do what they want to do without all of the back office nonsense.
That's right. Yeah. And I have learned taking care of that for people that run something big is a pretty big deal. Like, oh my gosh, you'll do all that? You have IT and you can set up my email address. You can do, all of that stuff is a pretty big draw for them. But really the biggest thing is, like, this is going to be fun, because when they join, we have 2 questions. What do you want to work on, and how much do you want to work? Because they don't want to work 40 hours a week, period. They'll work a few hours a week, right? And so generally speaking, like, okay, I want to work about this much, and I really want to work on this. So some may go, I want to work on coaching, and I love doing board work. Okay, got it. Some others may say, I'd be a little interested in learning how to do strategic planning the way you guys do it, and I want to do coaching. But by and large, all of them want to do coaching because that's the easiest for them to go make an impact in somebody else's life.
Very cool. Well, can you speak a little bit about the power of having a coach? Is it a friend? Is it a parent? Is it,
so anything that comes out of my mouth is going to sound like a sales job. And so I'm not that person.
Yeah.
You either want one or you don't. Okay. You either understand the value or you don't. Okay. And so I have coached people that didn't want to be coached. I actually sort of enjoy that because sometimes people are assigned to us, like they're a VP somewhere and their CEO goes, you need to go have some coaching. And that person shows up pissed off. All right. I actually enjoy those because I just learn, I love having at some point a breakthrough with that person. But generally speaking, if just somebody's out there in the open field, there's people that are not going to say, I need coaching, right? And that's okay. That's their decision. If you want coaching, the benefit of coaching comes from probably the single greatest benefit is all of us have, we don't even know we have them. We have lids to our growth, right? And if you think about this, if you knew what those were, you'd probably go fix them. The problem is they're blind spots. You don't even know you have them. So I think the single biggest benefit of coaching is understanding my blind spots and figuring out how do I work through those, work around those, whatever that may be. And so oddly enough, the blind spots, those aren't weaknesses. Like I know I'm weak at playing basketball, right? That's a very apparent weakness to me. That's not a blind spot, right? A blind spot's something you don't even know you're doing. And so we have a really unique way of sort of uncovering the blind spots. And you know where the blind spots are? The blind spots are always on the backside of your greatest strength. So if somebody is very analytical, and that's their greatest strength, and they can create spreadsheets in their sleep, that kind of a person, that is a marvelous skill. What's the blind spot? They may try to solve everything with a matrix and a spreadsheet, right?
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly, right? And so that's just one example of hundreds, right? So what we're looking for is what's your greatest strength, and then what's the not so obvious blind spot on the backside of that. And once you understand a blind spot, again, it's not a weakness. So where does blind spot come from? If you're driving a car, they all have a blind spot somewhere, right? And so once you know it, you can sort of work around it. And that's what we're doing with coaching, is helping them understand blind spots, helping them get where they want to go. And by the way, sometimes it's like, I hate what I'm doing, so everything's very confidential. And so we may help somebody figure out a different trajectory for themselves. That's not our goal. But once you build a deep relationship with somebody, the goal should be serving them wherever they need it. Because if they're miserable, you're talking to the number one biggest believer that you own your career. So I know what golden handcuffs look like, meaning golden handcuffs are, this job is so, they're paying me enough, I feel like I can't leave. And I'm like, oh yeah, you can, right? You need to own your career, because if you're staying somewhere that you're miserable, you have two choices. Number one, you have to figure out how to become happy where you are. And if you can't do that, go away. Because sitting in a role miserable is the worst thing in the world. It's not only miserable for you, it's miserable for everybody around you. But I have learned you can be happy in any role. But if you can't figure that out, go away. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to lecture.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, last question on Magellan before we get to Cortado. You were saying that it's very important for you to have a succession plan. What is the succession plan? I would imagine that you would need somebody younger as opposed to most of your consultants at the back end of their career.
Yeah, so we've got some folks in the group that because it's still in flux, if you will, but there is a succession plan in place. We haven't implemented, really haven't announced it or anything, but we've got a couple of folks that are like wanting to take it and run with it, and they're younger than I am, so it'll work out just fine.
Okay, that's an exciting future for Magellan. But I'm dying to ask, how does a former ditch digger, end up in venture capital?
Yep. So again, I'm just going to go back to look at where you are, figure out where you want to be. You own you is my deal. And at the same time, we decided to pivot Magellan, roughly about the same time. I had read somewhere that most people make most of their real wealth between the ages of 50 and 75. Now, it didn't describe what real wealth was, but I think everybody has some number in their head, like, I want to have this so I can pass this on to my kids or whatever that may be. Everybody has their own number. So I had sort of my number, and if you will, and I was like, crap, I'm halfway between 50 and 75, and I still haven't hit that number yet. So I'm enough of a business dude now that I said, okay, slow down, David. Think about what assets do you have that are maybe underutilized that you can utilize to achieve a different type of wealth, if you will. And so one of the things that we have at Magellan was what most people would call deal flow. So deal flow is where somebody shows up at the door and says, hey, I got this really cool idea for a business. Can Magellan help me? I'm like, no, sorry, that's not what we do. So, but we had a number, just enough of those to be interesting, all right? Like, no, you got to be a little larger before we can really help you. We're not designed to help a startup at Magellan from that standpoint. The other thing I had is I had friends with financial means. Later in your career, you in the world I'm in, you eventually meet people like that, right? And those people would go, David, if you ever see something cool worth investing in, would you let me know? Because these are people looking for cool investments. I'm like, okay, I got deal flow and I got people that are looking to investment. I'm like, somewhere in there is this thing. And in my head, it wasn't even VC. I didn't even understand VC. I'm like, I got to be able to put these together. There's got to be a business model in here somewhere. And again, I think this is another important lesson is getting people around you that are smarter than you are. And so I felt pretty driven by that deal because I knew it was real, but I didn't understand VC. So I called Mike Marotti, who's now a partner at Magellan, at Cortado. And I'm like, Mike, I've been thinking about this. I go, let's chat. And so we chatted, and he goes, oh, that's crazy. I've been having the same thought. And aligned with that was we felt like, in particular, Oklahoma and this mid-continent region had some pent-up demand of deal flow and people wanting to invest. And so we started down that path. I think it's been a little over 5 years ago. And Mike had a day job. He was at that time CEO of one of his own companies. And I was running Magellan. Neither one of us could do full-time this. And so we need a third partner. So, and these were all great people. And this wasn't anything negative, but we went through 3 potential executive partners. And for one reason or another, it just wasn't gonna work out. Again, there was nothing negative. It just wasn't going to work out. And then finally, the heavens parted, and Nathaniel Harding showed up. And I got introduced to him from another person, and it was just, and surprisingly, Nathaniel had been in the same like mental brain wave of like, I think there's an opportunity here. I think he'd already started studying VC and some things like that, and so it wasn't like he wasn't doing anything and joined us. He was already on a parallel path.
And he also had his own angel portfolio. So
yes.
he was.
Yes. So he was already there, right? And so we decided to join up, and it was freaking like mind-boggling how much pent-up demand there was for deal flow and people wanting to invest. And I think one of the more things I'm most proud of is sort of awakening Oklahoma and sort of the mid-continent of how important this is for this area, and how much pent-up demand there was. And we started early on. I've never believed in competition. I did way in my early days at Ditch Witch, but I think I've mentally grown since then. I don't believe in competing against anybody. For me, it's spiritual. I'm like, if you want to go work with them, go work with them. You know, if God meant for you to go work there, go work there. All right. Because I'm not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. And so when we started Cortado, that was one of my core beliefs. And we knew that if we created enough, other people would want to become VC firms. And so we started this thing like, let's be the most collaborative VC firm we can create. And so anytime somebody else is starting anything around VC world, we're always asking, is there anything we can do to help you? Is there anything we can do to help you? And I knew, and now it's being proven, that that's what creates momentum. When we all get around each other, help each other. I mean, that's how Oklahoma was born by somebody shooting off a shotgun and everybody coming in and working. And guess what farmers did? They would starve if they didn't help each other.
And that's why we're sitting here today with this podcast.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's true in all over the world, but for sure in Oklahoma, people like helping each other. And I think we're a good example of that at Cortado. I know we're a good example of that at Magellan. And life's just so much more enjoyable when you're helping each other versus trying to beat each other down. So,
yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about your contribution to Cortado, the strategy sessions that you put the teams, or that you put our team through, the executive coaching?
Yep. So Mike and Nathaniel are VC savants. Okay. I mean, they're just so dadgum smart. They're great students of the thing. They're still learning as they go, but they're already above most people. And so my goal was never, I need to be as smart about VC as Mike and Nathaniel. I'm like, that's not the value I'm going to bring. I think the value I bring is a lot of experience around strategy, leadership development, networking, whatever that may be. And so I very intentionally, what's my value? I enjoy figuring out where we're going to spend our money. So we think about it, we got 1,000 deals we look at every year. We invest in about 12. So once it gets down to, we've narrowed something down, that's when the three of us get pulled in and we make a decision, sort of yes or no, we're going to invest in this startup. And I enjoy that. I enjoy trying to think it through from based on my experience of what works, won't work, because it's all high risk because somebody's never done this before. Now you're going to do something. Does it have market need? Are you the right person to lead it? Investment decisions are number one to create a great return for the investors.
So I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I've noticed that you go to great lengths to really research and grapple with your investment committee decisions, that it's a responsibility that you take extremely seriously.
I do take it seriously because to your point, I'm not going to add value around the financial analysis of something the way Nathaniel and Mike do. What I can understand is I can understand a business. And is this business going to have the right trajectory to get us where we want to get a good return on investment? So yes, I do that. It's either number one is to make sure we're getting a good investors that give us millions of dollars to invest. That's not a light thing. And so shame on me if I can't spend some time studying where the investment's going to go. And so I take that as a responsibility, not I'm passionate about it. I mean, I am passionate, but that's not what drives me. What drives me is we have people that trusted us to go make good decisions.
Okay. Another observation about your contribution on the investment committee that I have is that you seem to be very focused on the human components. Like, who are the co-founders? How are they interacting with each other? What is the conversation that they're going to have with customers over and over and over. And eventually, how is that going to be a repeatable sales process? You really break things down on a human level to, what am I betting on here? That this person can have a conversation with that person and sell this vision, that I think gets lost in a lot of this obsession with metrics and how fast have they, like, you really look at the bigger picture and the human components.
Yeah.
Can you speak to what you're looking for?
You probably make it sound more higher level than the way my brain works. My brain works around, to your point, is this a person that can sell this idea to the marketplace? And if I listen to them, they may have great information about the little thing they created, but I'm like, my brain, and you can ask Nathaniel and Mike, at some point in the investment decision I'm at, I'll start asking about their go-to-market strategy. Because at some point, I don't care how cool the thing is, if they don't know how to go to market and they don't know how to go talk to a potential customer, it ain't going to work, right? And so one thing I've learned later in life is I have fairly good emotional IQ. And so I can spot that this person may be brilliant, but he pisses people off, or this person's brilliant, and I think people will run through a brick wall for this person, right? And everybody's somewhere on that spectrum. And so I'm looking for somebody on the more positive side of that. Can they get a team to go make things happen? Will the market listen to this person when they start talking? I mean, it's really the emotional stuff that I'm paying attention to. Again, it may look good on paper, but if I talk to you and you kind of make me mad when I'm chatting, I'm never going to buy from you.
Well, in an investor pitch, founders, they practice enough, it can be polished enough that they can put a facade on, maybe interpersonal communication weaknesses that they possess. Like, you really seem to have an eagle eye for, like, looking at somebody, evaluating them, seeing their motives, how they interact with other people. What are you seeing that the rest of us aren't seeing?
I don't know that I can answer that. I'm very big on looking for data points and extrapolating those data points. So they might be smooth in a presentation, but if I watch the interaction between the founding person and two or three of his right-hand people, I can spot pretty quickly, like, this is an amazing team, or it's a team filled with some stress. I mean, I'm not sure everybody can do that, but I think a lot of people can. And so I'm just looking for data points that are going to make me go, I'm not sure this is as clear as it is. And that'll oftentimes lead my questioning. I don't say, do you guys get along? But I'll ask enough questions I can kind of make them get off script a little bit so I can figure out, is this real, not real?
Okay. Sorry. I sidetracked you a little bit. But anyways, Cortado, really value your contribution to the investment committee. And then you also do quarterly strategy workshops with the team, help us set the long-term vision. You want to speak about that?
So we do the strategy stuff, and
these are fun.
Yeah.
These are fun.
Well, it's sort of fun when you're on a team. I don't care if you're brand new with Cortado or any organization, or you've been there for 30 years. Being a part of setting the future it's fun, right? I don't like organization where all of that's just, especially a smaller organization, where that's only done at the top. And so Cortado, like same as Magellan, the people that are involved are crazy smart. So, like, why wouldn't we tap that? And so anyway, we create that. We figure out what are the 3 or 4 things we need to do to kind of keep going down that path. Everybody gets on the same page. Everybody has assignments to whatever that strategy is. So everybody's now contributing to basically going and moving a mountain.
Well, it always amazes me the thoughtfulness and creativity that you put behind the exercises. And then you just kind of look around the room. People are laughing and they're smiling. Ideas are flowing. I think it's a real skill that you've learned to cultivate for managing the pulse of the room, whether you need to speed things up, slow them down. You've developed this sixth sense. Has that come more from your executive coaching, or is that cumulative of your career?
Probably more cumulative. Again, I'm 68, right? And so I probably had those skills early on. I just didn't know it. They were blind strengths more than anything. I remember when just before I became CEO, the owner, we'd be in a senior man. Again, I'm not CEO. I'm a senior management guy, and we'd be in a meeting, and the owner would look at me after we've bantered for a while around something. He'd look at me and he'd go, and it was his way of saying, "Please put a bow around this so we can get on with the next whatever." Right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, but I think somewhere along the way, I had that skill of I can take a lot of complexities of conversations and boil it down to, sounds like what we've decided is we need to go do A, B, and C. And so I sort of naturally have that ability to take complexities and simplify them. I do that whether I'm coaching somebody, whether I'm doing strategy, whatever that may be. And that's rather refreshing to people. Like, because if you're not careful, you can just banter all day long and never really make a decision.
Yeah.
And I think people find it fun and refreshing. We're like, oh, good. The bantering meant something. And now we have clear direction.
There's some plan of action and we're all committed to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's always nice to have a plan. Okay. We have a few minutes left, and I'd be remiss if we missed all of your great networking wisdom. You are the author of a book, The Art of Networking, and you run networking workshops for our team. And I have extracted enormous value out of both of them. And there's little things that I do all the time. And I think back, David said this, David said that, David would do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I did write a book. Just a quick aside.
Yeah.
This is a sales pitch. Brent Douglas and I have been writing a book for the last 2.5 years, and it's going to be out this fall. And so we're going to do a fair amount of promotions over the next year once that comes out. And I'm very, very excited about it. It's a little more in line with leadership, strategy, that kind of thing. It's basically a book full of, we think, really cool leadership nuggets that you can kind of open it up to. And it's like the Bible. You can kind of open it up anywhere and you're going to get something out of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we want this book to be. You don't have to read it cover to cover. But back to networking. So high school, I was voted shyest boy in school, and that was voted on by all the girls. 1,500 kids. The girls were half the class, and I was voted shyest boy in school. And I thought, well, that's cute, but that's not going to serve me well. So in college, I took some speech courses. They helped a little bit, but not great. Ended up going to work for Ditch Witch. And again, you remember I talked about they would send you out to a territory. So I'm going to different territories. I don't know a soul other than the Ditch Witch dealer. And I would go at that. There was events. You might go to an evening cocktail party at some industry function. And I realized, crap, I'm a wallflower here. I didn't know how to meet people very well. And so this is the lesson that I preach a lot, which is if you have something you're not good at, don't view it as a personality flaw. And I had to get that out of my head. Me being, if you will, a little introverted or shy at that point in my life, I said, David, it's not a personality flaw. It's just a skill you need to learn. And I don't care where you are in life. Most of it, if you just say, it's not a problem. I just need to learn the skill. And so I decided I'm going to learn the skill of networking. And so I'm a pretty good observer. And so I thought I'm just going to watch people that are great at it. You can go to any cocktail party and just look around the room and you can figure out pretty quickly who the great networkers are. And so I started watching that. And I think one of the moments that I really remember was I realized most of these people didn't know each other when they walked in, but somehow they're talking, but they're not talking to me. And so I started paying attention to people that just somehow naturally did it. And it's a weird one. What I learned was people will walk up to somebody that looks pleasant. That's a nuance. So I had to figure out, how do I look pleasant in a cocktail party? So I know this sounds weird. In my hotel room, I would stand in front of the mirror and try to make my face look pleasant instead of RBF, right?
Yeah.
And you have to do that so it doesn't come across creepy to people either, right? And so I sort of learned this skill of just being pleasant looking, if you will. And it was shocking how many people would then come up and want to talk to me. And I still use that today. We were in San Francisco at a Cortado event a few months ago, and I didn't know a soul. And I just had my little cocktail, and I'm standing there, and I just decided, David, just look pleasant. And it was shocking how many people, they're just looking for somewhere safe. All right.
Does this work with girls too?
I don't know. I never dated. I've been married 47 years and I didn't have to go through dating her. We just became instantly a couple. So my guess would be yes, it would. Right.
Okay.
So anyway, I went through that. I became better and better at networking. Finally, somebody asked me to give a speech on some topic that was really boring. By then, I'd gotten a little better at networking, and they told me who the audience was. I go, how about if I come talk on networking? All right. They go, oh, that'd be great. So I went and talked on networking, kind of made up this little speech on the fly, and it went really well. And so I started keep getting invited back to different events to speak on networking. Finally, 10 years in of that, someone goes, you got to write a book on that. I don't want to write a book. No, you need to write a book, and went through a few years of that, finally wrote a book, and it's actually been out about 10 years now. But literally last week, some guy wrote me out of the blue and said, I still remember when you told me this in your networking speech, and it's part of the book as well. He goes, I still use that all the time. And so, again, it's like anything else. You pick up nuggets. I hope today in this conversation, hopefully there's some nugget that somebody picked up, like maybe I need to rethink what I'm doing with my career, or maybe I need to do this better or something like that. I mean, that's the fun part for me, is if somehow you and I chatting has created a nugget or two for somebody to do something different with their life, then that's the fun for me.
Well, David, is there anything else that you'd like to add? You've offered so much wisdom and walked us through such a fascinating career.
No. Probably the best metaphor I can think of around, I'll say, my career, most great leaders' careers. We give out a gift every once in a while, and it's a piece of glass. It's a little glass sculpture. I don't like giving away gifts that have my brand on it. That seems very egotistical. So we had this thing where, like, let's give them a gift of some kind. And we commissioned a glass artist, Chris McGahee, who's here in Oklahoma City, and he's a glass blower. And he tells the story of he and his son making glass, and there's a lot of broken glass on the ground. And they said, let's go see if we can utilize this glass. His son was really the one pushing that. So they started making beautiful glass sculptures out of broken glass. And he tells a story. He's a very strong Christian guy. Tells a story of how God knows we're all broken, but I can still make something beautiful out of it, And I use that for leadership as well. I view that as like every leader is around people on a team, and everybody's a little bit broken in some one way or another. And so great leadership is about, how do I take all of these slightly broken people, and I don't mean that negative, I mean, we all have flaws, and create something beautiful out of it. And that drives me a lot, because you will never have the perfect team. You will never have the perfect job. You will never have anything that's perfect. Your role, I don't care if you're 23 or 63, is to figure out, how do I take all of this unique little not so compatible parts and put them together into something beautiful? And that's driven me my whole life. And that's why I like that sculptor. To me, it's the perfect metaphor of kind of the way I view business and life.
Way to end the episode with such a great capstone concept for us. David, you've been a mentor to me, a friend, a colleague. Really, really appreciate everything that you've given me in our relationship. You've contributed to the Cortado team and also the Oklahoma startup ecosystem. I founded a startup here. I've had to raise money here. I've raised money from Cortado. Just really respect the legacy that you're leaving.
Well, thanks. You're an awesome interviewer, so thank you for being as great as you are.
All right. Thank you, David. Have a good one.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Midcon Markup. Please hit like and subscribe for more episodes.